Harmony Montgomery. How Massachusetts fails to protect a child. I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
Today we're going to be discussing what hasn't been done to protect children. So in the case of Harmony Montgomery, what, holes everything fell through. Why is nobody checking up on these kids that are being put into foster systems and getting sent to their parents, and with the parents having criminal records? Like, what is going on with that?
Well, the Massachusetts legislature held a hearing on setting up what they're going to call the Harmony Montgomery Commission. Of course, Harmony had been under the state's watch when her case came up for review. And the state knew that her blood father was a man that had had a criminal background, and he had had a drug background. Nonetheless, based on the longtime preference for the blood parents, the Harmony's custody was granted to her blood father, and it wasn't long after that that poor Harmony disappeared tragically, and it's presumed that she has died. So now the Massachusetts legislature wants to set up the Harmony Montgomery Commission. As you know, I'm always suspicious of things like this, and true to form, apparently there had been a proposal to do this the previous year, but in the budgetary process at the last minute, the proposed Harmony Montgomery Commission fell between the cracks and didn't happen. So now it is up for consideration again.
And something to consider too, beyond, obviously this child is missing. They didn't realize that she was missing for 2 years. So you have this kid who's been placed with, blood relative, which, obviously our first inclination is to think that it's good to keep things in the family. But nobody's checking up. He's going from New Hampshire to Massachusetts, and there's no communication between these states, and nobody's coming in and checking and seeing the living conditions. And it's just a disaster all around, I would say.
The foster parents of Harmony's brother, Jameson, had reached out and tried to connect so that the brother and sister could communicate and establish a relationship as young as they were. And the parents of the brother testified before the legislature that as much as they tried, as much as they reached out, as much as they tried to go through DCF, and as much as they went through other channels, they were rebuffed at every turn. So it's easy to sit here and say that the case fell between the tracks, but there is a little 5-year-old girl that is gone tragically. The story apparently is that her father and the father's girlfriend were driving around in the car, and Harmony had a bathroom accident, and the father reached behind and slugged her. And then they went on and they had the father and the girlfriend had some fast food somewhere in Manchester, New Hampshire. And after they helped themselves to the fast food, then they realized that little Harmony was gone. And the details after that aren't really known precisely. The New Hampshire Attorney General's office has its reasons, but they keep their cards close to the vest. And so I am guessing that a lot of facts will come out at the trial of this case that we don't know. But how tragic is that they just presume the father, the blood relative, is the right person to have custody of this young, vulnerable girl, even though he had a drug history and he had a criminal history, and say whatever you want to me, but to just give a young girl like that who had some needs to the father who had a drug history and a criminal history, in retrospect, of course, just was wrong and turned out to be wrong.
Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned, it's just like he had this criminal history. And I guess something to keep in mind too, because for a lot of people, without the context of what happened, this 2-month-old baby was in foster care for 4 years. So, it's like, oh, now she's back at home. But why? How was it allowed when you have someone with these criminal charges to get the child back? But it's a 5-year-old kid, the fact that this happened, you're giving this child to someone with a record, and you're not, this child's gone missing for 2 years, nobody notices. How are we protecting our kids? How is foster care? How is giving kids to their relatives? What are you actually doing to protect your kids? It's almost like they're, it's just this facade. It's just like, oh, we have the kids' best interest in mind, when in reality, nothing's really being done. And like you had mentioned before, the foster parents had made attempts to take Harmony, to connect the kids, establish a relationship. And despite, them being relatives, there's really nothing that the state did to help contribute to these kids being able to maintain a familiar relationship, which is really sad.
So my question is this: if the DCF and the other officials in the state were unable to protect poor Harmony, and then they said they were going to set up a commission, and that went by the wayside in the budgetary process, and now at this time that we're doing this podcast, it's been raised again. We're going to set up a Harmony Montgomery Commission to study the way that we deal with these cases and determine what is in the best interest of the child. Because no matter what happens, the best interest of the child is always the overriding concern in placements like this. And I'm not saying it's not a hard job. I'm not saying it's not, something that requires, the real knowledge and wisdom that any human being can exhibit. But I am saying that if the state, failed to set up the commission the first time, and now, there were a lot of headlines, as well there should be, about the commission, what's really going to happen. So I am one of little faith that a whole lot will happen, because people will testify further that, well, the blood parents should be given a chance, and just because they're, they have a criminal past doesn't mean they're not, trying to make a better path for their own future, and we should give people that have had a drug past a second chance. All of which is true, but I mean, just to automatically inject that the primary factor in making these decisions is the blood parent, I'm saying that's wrong. And I don't have a lot of faith, and I hope I'm wrong, but I don't have a lot of faith in a legislative governmental solution in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, it's like kind of crazy too when you think about it, because it's just like how far could have a psychological evaluation gone in a situation like this? It's just like there's things that you can do to ensure that the kid is going into a safe environment, and yet we still have all these issues with kids in foster care where they're not graduating school, they don't have resources, they're becoming teen parents. You have this whole system that is meant to kind of provide the illusion that kids are being helped, but at the end of the day, we see the consequences of when that system fails.
Yeah, we were looking at some research before we came on here to do this podcast with the general fail rate with respect to kids that have been through the system. So it's pretty tough. By the age of 21, well over a quarter will not have completed high school or gotten a GED. Half of the kids that go through the system will have neither part or full-time employment. More than a third will have experienced a period of homelessness. Almost a quarter will be incarcerated, and almost 20% will be parents themselves. So this goes far beyond little Harmony Montgomery, as tragic and awful and sad as that story is. That the system itself is failing such a high proportion of children. And I don't know that a commission set up with the real needle-nosed focus that is being given on this one case, as it should be, but I don't know if that focus will really make a difference in the overall system. That's the source of my skepticism.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is completely valid too, because when you look at these cases and how we're talking about these kids struggling later on in life, it's very important to keep into consideration what is getting these kids into foster care in the first place. You are having these kids that were in situations that are bad enough that you're taking them away from their families, and most cases bad enough. So when you're putting that kid somewhere else, you're not checking to make sure that they're getting all the resources they need. Are these kids going to counseling? Are these kids going to have some type of financial stability by the time that they hit 18, because a lot of the times you have these kids, they hit 18, all right, you're out of the foster system, good luck. And that's not including all of the various times that, parents maybe aren't doing anything particularly bad and still getting taken away. We often hear about like the poppy seed urban legend. I don't know if I want to call it an urban legend, because there have been court cases where mothers have sued because they have their children taken away from them. And, it comes days later, they do a drug test and they're fine because, they ate poppy seeds.
Wait a minute. Tell me more. I mean, I've read about this, I've heard about this, but I am far from an expert. What is the poppy seed issue? Tell me more about that, please.
I am not a medical expert. In doing a little bit of research for this, I was able to see that even the Department of Defense suggests that service members do not eat foods with poppy seeds, because if you eat foods with poppy seeds, the drug tests that are administered are extremely sensitive. So even though a poppy seed bagel might not get you high, it still might be enough to trigger a drug test. So when people go into labor, a lot of the times, I think actually, I'm not sure all states have this law, but some states do have laws where they'll do blood tests and not necessarily even inform, the mother. But if something comes up on these blood tests, that baby is going to be taken away. And as we're seeing in some of these court cases where the mothers are actually fighting back, people have said, they were eating, whether it be a cake that had poppy seed in it, or a bagel that had poppy seed, and not realizing. So it has been an issue. It's not a super, super common issue. I found a couple of court cases in the past decade, but if the Department of Defense is arguing against poppy seed bagels, there is some validity into the fact that maybe not all these parents that are having their kids removed are necessarily doing anything wrong in the first place. And it's like, if it gets to that point, and, sometimes the parents do fortunately get the kids back, but one, what trauma is being done to that kid in the week that the kid is gone? But then on top of that, that just goes to show how easy it is to just lose your kid, and then no investigations are being done after to really affirm this or make sure that, it's like CPS gets called on your house. I mean, unfortunately,
that's crazy.
Yeah, it's like things like there's some situations where they check out, but there's some situations where, things can happen like that.
That's really astonishing. It really is. I read a little bit, but I never knew as much as you just informed us. So getting back to the Montgomery case itself, Adam Montgomery was convicted on unrelated gun charges in the Hillsborough County, New Hampshire Superior Court in Manchester, New Hampshire. He was given a sentence of approximately 35 to 70 years, so he'll already be behind bars for quite a period of time, and certainly there will be an appeal. But in the closing hours of that case, Mr. Montgomery spoke out and spoke to the judge in open court and denied anything to do with the death of Harmon, his daughter, and also said that he was offended by the very fact that there were charges. We shall see. Lainey, any closing thoughts?
Obviously love your kids. Take care of the people you love. Be a good support system for the kids that you may have in your life. It's a really sad story. We don't want to see this again, but hopefully with the Harmony Montgomery case, hopefully this can at least push the needle a little bit into the right direction. It may not ever be pushed where it needs to be far enough, but keeping in mind, especially if you are a foster parent, to remember to get your kids counseling. And even if you're not a foster parent, it never hurts just to make sure that your kids' well-being is intact. But thank you guys so much for watching. And
also, the system always needs foster parents, and a lot of people that can't have kids can apply and go through that process. And I've known people that have done that, and it's a rewarding experience. So thank you. Hope you've enjoyed this look at this awful case. Please subscribe for additional content, and don't forget to like. Thank you for joining us.
We'll see you in the next one.
You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts and in Derry, just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. Remember to click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your friends and others. If you'd like to talk to me about an injury case, a car accident, a slip and fall, a serious bodily injury case, or some other case, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you. You can contact us through my website at attorney-myers.com. We have a contact us block, or you can call on one of the telephone numbers we've given there, or you can email me at andrew@attorney-myers.com. The foregoing is offered for informational purposes only. It is not intended as and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies. This podcast must be and hereby is labeled advertisement in some jurisdictions.